Hello and welcome to my channel, Voluptas Ocularum. It means pleasure of the eye. My name is Stephanie, and in today's video I am going to take you through this very large spring watercolor and mixed media art haul. I did film this back in March of 2026 when all of these materials first arrived, and March is my birthday month, so I did go a little bit crazy with all of these materials. I only got around to editing all of the footage in July just because I've been really busy with work and a few other things that I'm going to be announcing soon. Many of these items I purchased during these spring sales at various art stores. A lot of the stuff is from Jackson's during their 20% off watercolor sale that happened in March. There was also some really good sales at Great Art and Bromley's. And there's also this store called Everything Art, which I believe is shutting down for good, or maybe has already shut down by the time this video is out. And they were having like 50 to 70% off all of their items, so I picked up a bunch of things from there as well. So besides the major art stores, I also picked up a few things from Amazon, including these Pantone marker sets. So these are sets of 9 Pantone matched markers, and normally on the Pantone website and on other websites they retail for like anywhere from 40 to 80 pounds for a set, which seems crazy to me, and they were only $13.50 on Amazon. So hopefully they're not dupes. I have no idea, but they seemed to perform pretty well. I also picked up this new Ohuhu marker pad, which is a newer version of one that I already have and have been working in. It is completely bleed proof. It's really nice thick paper. And I got those because I also got almost all of the Ohuhu Kala marker sets. I was teaching a class this spring and I needed to recommend some marker sets to my students. So I decided to try out the Ohuhu ones, and those are the ones that I recommended to them. I also picked up this bamboo Minbu marker holder. I actually got 2 of them because they have these like little dividers that keep the markers from rolling around, and I really liked that. In this box, I have a combination of orders from different stores, including Bromley's, Great Art, and Etsy. I have been on a real alcohol marker kick as well as acrylic markers, but in March I was primarily testing alcohol markers. And it all started with an eBay marker haul that I got of vintage Letraset markers, and then I started looking at different papers that I could use because I realized I didn't really have that many options. So I picked up these pads so that I could compare them. And since March was my birthday month, I bought myself this really beautiful set of 48 hand-poured watercolors from Essie. They are an Italian watercolor company that sells on Etsy. And so, yeah, that's my gift to myself. I mean, I guess along with everything else in these boxes. Yeah, and on Great Art, they had the Daniel Smith watercolor sticks for like 8 pounds each, which is 4 to 5 pounds less than they normally are anywhere else. So I added a few more to my collection that I've been kind of growing over the past 2 years. I also added some 15 mil tubes of some new colors for me. Everybody raves about Cascade Green, so I thought I better try it, along with a couple of other colors, including Coral Reef, which is one of my absolute favorites right now. And then I got this December 2025 special edition Roman Szmal pan. I believe in this bag we're just showing some refills for the Derwent line makers, which I use a lot in my work. And then I also picked up quite a few of the Rosa Gallery watercolors. So these are, I think I got all of the new colors except for one that was out of stock. And I also refilled a few tubes that I had used up the pans on. So my first experience with Rosa Galleries was with a set that came in full pans, and some of the colors I have used quite a lot, so I decided to pick up some tubes to refill them. What I didn't realize is that quite a few of those colors are not very light fast. I didn't really look at that before I bought them. I just sort of was like, oh, I need a refill, so I'll just get them. So I also noticed that there were these really great 100% cotton watercolor sketch pads from a company called Pan Art. They have deckled edges. They're a little thinner than normal. They're only 200 GSM instead of 300, but I wanted to test them out. I also got Bockingford paper because I was told it could be good for markers. I don't know, I haven't tested it yet. In this box, which is primarily from Jackson's, I picked up this Retro Schminke Horadam palette on sale, and I also replaced one of my Tintoretto Zero mop brushes, which I've already burnt through two others. And then I picked up a few flat brushes as well. There's also these Holbein watercolor pencils, and I'm just going to do a quick spoiler, which is that I did return the Schminke palette and the watercolor pencils. I just didn't really like them. Here we have some new core colors, including cobalt blue and hooker's green, a few colors that I really wanted, and this medium. Also from Jackson's, I picked up quite a few Jackman's watercolors. So I already had some of these in my collection. I have a lot of their kind of more traditional colors, but I wanted to try out some of these more unique tones, and they were on sale. So I thought, what better time to test them out? And then here you're seeing me dump out a few extra Rosa Gallery colors, which weren't in stock from the other stores. And so I had to buy them from Jackson's, but yeah, they were all on sale. So that was great. And I am excited to test out those Jackman's watercolors. Some of them are quite beautifully granulating. I also picked up a few Sennelier watercolors. These are ones that I had in pan form, but I needed them in tubes because I needed to refill. And then I got this luminous red because I've seen people using this and it looks amazing. Finally, I got a few of the Pith sketchbooks. I got a Lumia and an Oro Blanco. I have a couple of the Pith sketchbooks that I've used in the past. I really like them for mixed media. They're not the thickest paper, but these colors were so beautiful, I could not resist adding them to my collection. I also picked up, and this was, I believe, from Jackson's, a set of Charvin 24 pans. Um, you know, these watercolor paints, people bring them back from France. They're quite pretty. There's a few sets that have really colorful tins that have been very popular. And so, yeah, when I first opened them up, I noticed there was a bunch of weird dust, like looked like little flakes of pigment that had come off the paints and were kind of floating all over the box. But I cleaned that up. And when I looked at the paints, they looked really beautiful and luminous. So we're going to test those out and swatch them today. So let's start with these Pantone markers. These are Royal Talon's Pantone colored double tip markers. Now, when I say I've been on a marker kick, I really mean it. I was using these for a class that I'm teaching. It's a design studio for Masters of Landscape Architecture. And I wanted to find some marker sets that I could recommend to my students. So that's kind of why I started with the Ohuhu markers. And then I also picked up these sets because I wanted to find some colors that were really, really good for landscape. And I decided to pick up these sets because I thought they had a pretty good variety. Unfortunately, there are some duplicates between the sets, which is kind of annoying, but regardless, I still enjoyed using them. This is a cartridge paper handmade sketchbook that I made myself, and it's kind of where I swatch out all of the marker materials that I use for sketching for landscape architecture. But yeah, it's a really good paper for markers. I find it's a pretty smooth paper and it's also pretty thick, so stuff doesn't really bleed through. So I'm just going to swatch out a couple of these sets. And I think I did all of them except for the pastels in this video, although I did swatch out everything separately on its own paper later, and I pan over that so that you can see all of the different colors. Now these markers come with two tips. One is a brush tip, which is quite flexible, and one is a chisel tip. So it really depends on how you like to use markers. Brush tips are kind of new to me. I've only ever really used fine tip and chisel tip in my design work, but I really am enjoying brush tips and the flexibility that they have and how you can sort of like poke them into really tiny spaces and get good details with them. So yeah, I have been enjoying the brush tips on the markers that I've picked up so far. Here are the greens, and what I really liked about this range was that there was a variety of lights and darks and quite naturalistic tones. I know people are very particular about greens. I'm very green agnostic, I would say, in the sense that I will take almost any green and I will just modify it if I need to. In landscape architecture, you do need quite a large variety of greens to create plans and drawings. So the more greens, the merrier, in my opinion. This is the swatch sheet I actually prepared for the markers separately, and I just swatched everything out, removing all of the duplicates, and then tested kind of how they layer over top of each other. Now, also from Everything Art, I picked up a few Ecoline, I think that's how you say them, or Ecoline, um, water soluble like watercolor markers, and these just have one flexible brush tip on them. And they are, I think, ink based. I don't think they're pigment based. So you can sort of sense that when you're working with them, that it does kind of feel a little bit more inky and less pigmenty. And I also got this apricot colored Stabilo Woody. It is pretty creamy, but I don't think I would use it with water just because it does wash out pretty light. Next up, I am testing all of the Holbein watercolor pencils. I got two whites, which I just set to the side because I knew you wouldn't be able to see them anyways. And I got a range of fairly pastel colors because I figured that the way that I use colored pencils in my work right now is kind of like over top of other water soluble mixed media. Ultimately, I washed these out with water and I wasn't really stoked about their pigment payoff. So I did end up returning all of these watercolor pencils. I just didn't feel like they were going to add anything to my practice that I didn't already have covered in other art materials. I thought that if they felt like significantly different, more creamy, or gave more cover, that I would have kept them, but they washed out to almost nothing. They didn't really feel like they're not the same feel as the artist pencils, let's put it that way. And I only have like two of the artist pencils. I have the white and the soft white, but these don't feel anything like that. They're not the same feel at all. They're not like really super creamy. So I didn't feel they were going to add anything to my practice, and I ended up returning them all. Now, I don't remember unpacking these, but I must have had them in a box somewhere in this art haul. And these are Faber-Castell uh, Albrecht Duhrer watercolor pencils. These are probably the best watercolor pencils that I have. And I have a whole bunch of different other colors. So these are just additions to my existing color sets. They are so pigmented. They are really easy to put down on paper. They have a beautiful naturalistic color range. I just love them so much. So if I was going to recommend watercolor pencils, I would recommend these ones. And I do like the super colors as well, the Caran d'Ache Supra colors. They have a really beautiful color range. They are also very creamy and highly pigmented. I would recommend the Caran d'Ache Museum aquarelles, but they are insanely expensive. So I think you can definitely get by with these types of color pencils, watercolor pencils instead. You don't need to like go for the super highly expensive ones. I wanted to test how the white watercolor went over top of other materials, and I wasn't super stoked about this white Holbein watercolor pencil. It seemed a little mm, pasty to me. I tried it together with this Derwent drawing pencil in Chinese white, and then also the Holbein Artist color pencil in soft white. The soft white one is definitely the most opaque and the most bright white. I also pulled out a couple of other watercolor pencils that I commonly use, including Derwent tinted charcoal, some Derwent graphitint, and then also I believe there was the Museum Aquarelle white. And this is what the watercolor pencils look like, both on the cartridge paper, and I also swatched them out on Arch's 140-pound watercolor paper just to see if like there was any improvement in their performance. Next, I am unwrapping and showing you all of the pan art papers that I picked up. So from different places, these were on sale. Some of them are from Everything Art. which is a small online art shop that seems to be going out of business. They may have a few things left. I haven't looked at their website recently, but when I looked, it seemed like they were going out of business and selling everything off. So there was lots of deals to be had. So I picked up a few of these pads. They are rag edges, so like cotton deckled rag edges. It is 100% cotton paper, but it is relatively thin, and it sort of reminded me of the Khadi papers. So I pulled out a Khadi fat pad to compare, just to show the texture as well as the color of the pages. And then I also have this Khadi sketchbook that's 210 GSM and smooth. So I wanted to compare that because it felt like it was maybe a little bit more comparable to the paper, but it is like in terms of the texture, but I would say in terms of the color, obviously there's a huge difference. But yeah, I think these papers are in the same line of paper types as the Khadi papers. So if you have those, these will feel very familiar. I really loved this. It was a huge cloth bound book, and this is with clean cut pages. It's a little whiter, but the pages are very, very thin. And ultimately, as I've been using that and also this 12 by 12 inch one, I've realized that water soluble materials will bleed through these if you use a lot of water and if you use a lot of pigment. So you do have to either put something behind them, or you have to just be prepared that, you know, some pages you can't use back to front. So you can't use both sides of the page essentially. If you want to create on them, you just use one side of the page and then sort of leave the other one blank. But ideally, you would put something protective behind the pages while you're working because depending on the thickness of the paper you're using with this line, it does bleed through. I had picked up a whole bunch of these Bombay India inks from Everything Art. They, like I said, everything was on sale for pretty good prices. Like I'd say like 70% off or even more. Bombay India inks, I think we're going for like less than £2 per bottle. And normally they're like 5 or 6, maybe even higher. Now, I did run into an issue with the orange, which is that it was extremely thick and gloopy. It did not flow the way that the other Bombay India inks flowed. And you can see that as I'm dragging my brush across the page. Some of them flow really, really beautifully, but then there's that kind of gloopy orange that just sort of is in a thick pile and it doesn't really do anything on the page. I end up sort of picking those up and cleaning them off a bit later. But the colors that I selected were essentially based on whatever stock was remaining. So they didn't have any greens or blues in the stock, but they had tons of reds, yellows, and pinks. So that's kind of where my focus was. And that was fine because I actually have quite a few acrylic inks, which I know are not exactly the same, but they're kind of similar. And I have a bunch of acrylic inks in greens and blues, but I didn't have really that many oranges or reds. So yeah, I decided to go for these ones. I thought that the colors were extremely vibrant, super beautiful, and they flowed for the most part very, very well. I used my spray bottle to add a little bit more water to the page and just give a tiny bit more flow. And then I tried shaking up that orange again just to see what was happening, but no, it just stayed sort of gloopy. So I ended up pulling off some of that really thick orange stuff just to make sure that the page was actually going to dry and not end up with big lumps everywhere. Now, after this page dried, I turned the paper over, and that's where I noticed that some of the pigment has bled through, and only in a few little spots, but you can see it was still wet. So I basically just sort of like wiped it up with a paper towel. But that's just something to be aware of, is that, you know, this paper does bleed through. However, when you look at the result of the India ink on this paper, I think the texture and the way the ink flowed is so beautiful. Like I'm kind of obsessed with it. Okay, that is my new Tintoretto size 0 mop brush. Again, that was a replacement for two that I've already used that are kind of damaged now. I also picked up that Chinese calligraphy brush and a couple of these Isabe flat brushes and also a Princeton Aqua Elite flat brush in a 1/4 inch size. I really wanted the 1/2 inch size, but it's continuously out of stock. So now I am getting these Charvin watercolors ready to swatch. I gave them a good spray to make sure that they would activate. I've seen a lot of people swatch out these watercolors, but I've never seen anybody do the full 24 set. I've seen a lot of the 12 sets. And so I was really curious about how these colors would lay down on the paper, how they would feel. And I have to be honest with you, they did not really impress me very much. They are not as pigmented as you would expect based on how colorful they look in the pans. Now, I know that there is a tendency for certain styles of watercolor, and I know that like Sennelier watercolors, also French watercolors, are also very translucent and transparent and don't really pack a punch when it comes to the first wash in their pigment laydown, but that they're kind of more for glazing. And so their strength and their quality really comes through in their translucency and their transparency. So I really wanted to try to give these a chance to shine. Now, I do like the way that the colors flowed into each other there, where I touched the circles together. And as I continue swatching, you'll see some of these colors flow into each other. And I actually find that quite beautiful. But I do find some of these colors like kind of chalky. So I do have to agree with other people who have tried these. They're not necessarily if you're used to really highly pigmented watercolors like Daniel Smith or Roman Szmal, you might find these colors and the way that they lay down a little bit weak. That's not to say that they're bad watercolors or that they don't have a use at all. It's just that for the way that I like to work, I'm not sure that these are the best choice for me. I think that some of my least favorite colors in this set were the blues and the greens. Yeah, first of all, there was no pigment information about these colors, and I find that really strange for an artist quality. Like Sennelier has all of their pigment information available. Charvin, I guess they probably have it somewhere, but it's not printed on the pans, and all the pans come fully unwrapped and with no text on them, besides that they had a number on the bottom of the pan that told you what the color code was. But all of these blues, they just felt really light and as if all of them had some white added to them, which is not really what you want from watercolors. Like you want pure pigments that you can either water down yourself if you need to or add white to if you want to. But all of these, even the really dark, I think that was in some kind of indanthrine, or maybe they call it a midnight blue. I don't know, but it everything was just like a little bit less than what I thought it was going to be, and I couldn't really get it dark. I couldn't really get the pigments to feel like they were like fully loaded, you know? And maybe, I guess, for some people, they may like these very delicate colors with very low tinting strength. But for me, I found them a little bit underwhelming. I finished watching these and I did a second glaze over top of them with a flat brush just to see how they would look after they had been glazed. And I would say that the color intensity did improve quite a bit with the glazing. However, I then compared these to some of my other watercolors. So I compared them to similar colors that I had in Sennelier, as well as Lukas 1862 watercolors, because I was like, look, are these actually better than what I already have? And to me, it didn't seem like they were. So ultimately, after doing this swatch test, I decided to return the Charvin colors. I did like go through, clean up the palette, make sure everything was perfectly clean and like there was no paint. So it's not like I returned the product dirty or anything like that. I really went through with a Q-tip and made sure like there was no paint in between the pans, but I had barely really used them. And Jackson's does allow you to return lightly used items. So that's what I did because I just didn't feel like I was going to end up using these when I had other watercolors that performed much better and had a better pigment load for, better price. So essentially, I just opted to not add these to my collection. Okay, I guess I forgot to film the part where I swatched out all of the Daniel Smith watercolor sticks, but these are all the colors that I got. And essentially what I did was I rubbed them in a little bit of water in a ceramic dish and then used a brush to brush the color right onto the page. And then where you see the sort of like blotchy areas in the swatches, that's where I rubbed the stick directly onto wet paper and then sort of dragged it out in both directions. I also swatched out my inks on this paper just to have it, a record of it on watercolor paper. And now I'm going through and I am swatching the Sennelier aquarelle tubes that I picked up. This one is phthalo turquoise. So I actually had a pan form of this in La Petite Aquarelle, which is their student line version. I ended up selling my Petit Aquarelle half pans as a set. And so therefore I had to get rid of my phthalo turquoise. So I decided to invest in the artist quality tube. The same with this Helios purple, which is actually more like a quinacridone magenta, I would say. And I realized here that I had phthalo turquoise still on my brush and in the water. So I decided to clean that up and start again. That's better. So this is like the actual color of the pigment. It is a bright pink color, even though it says Helios purple, it is really more like a pink. So if you're looking for a pink, that's the one to get. I also got this Rose Madder Lake. I thought it was going to be more like a genuine rose, but it ended up being kind of more on the red side, I would say, which is not what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was more pinky, but it's fine. I kept it anyways. Now, this luminous red, it is pretty awesome. I just used some color directly from the cap, and I think now I would call this more akin to a fluorescent coral color, not really a red and not really a pink. It's somewhere in between. And I love the brightness of this. I know it is not light fast whatsoever, but that is not going to stop me from using it in my sketchbooks. Finally, in this last little tiny space I have, I remembered that I had this Roman Szmal limited edition 2025 color, which is a beautiful green color that has some brown toned like color separating granulation in it. So I just added a little bit of water to that swatch to see if I could get those colors to sort of come out and play. So again, I don't know what happened to my footage. I thought I was filming, but I swatched out all of the Daniel Smith watercolors, and the ones that I had were Cascade Green, Viridian, Chromium Green Oxide, Manganese Violet, Indian Red, and Coral Reef. And of those, Viridian and Coral Reef are currently in my palette for summer, and I've been using them constantly. I love Daniel Smith's version of Viridian, and the Coral Reef color is just so beautiful. It literally goes with everything. Now I'm swatching out the core colors, and I love this benzimidazolone burnt orange color. It is so beautiful. I think this is the replacement for their quinacridone burnt orange, which I actually later picked up a tube of from a site that was going out of business. So I picked up a few different out of production core colors later. I don't know exactly when that happened. I think it was in April or May, but yeah, I do really like this benzimidazolone burnt orange, and it is a good sort of burnt sienna color if you're looking for something like that. Likewise, the hooker's green, so beautiful. This is actually like a hooker's green that I could get behind because it is dark and rich and super powerful. It's not like too far leaning into the phthalo green, which I feel like a lot of Hooker's greens do. I mean, every core color is beautiful. The cobalt blue and the cobalt turquoise both flow so gorgeously, and the cobalt blue is currently in my palette. The indigo is also a very gorgeous shade, super dark and intense. Yeah, so very happy about those. Now I am swatching out all of the Jackman's watercolors. So what we have here is Marigold Orange. I have another orange by Jackman's called, what is it called? Benzimidazole. Is it benzimidazolone orange? Yes, that's what it is. But that's the only other orange I have, and I really wanted something a little bit on the yellow side, so I picked up the marigold color. We have Permanent Rose as our next swatch here. And in all of these swatches, I am using my Tintoretto size 0 synthetic squirrel mop. This is the new brush that I just got. And I basically use this brush for everything. It comes with me plein air painting, it stays in my studio. I always have this brush around. Now, I did like kind of use two of these brushes to the point where their tips are no longer pointy and the bristles are looking a little bit worse for the wear. That's why I decided to pick up a new one, because during Jackson's watercolor sale, they were also having a sale on their watercolor brushes. So I decided it was the right time. But honestly, I did keep the old ones and they're just sort of hanging around just in case I need something similar. I just really love this brush. I don't know if I'll find like another version of other types of watercolor brushes that I would use instead, because I just enjoy this one so much. So I've swatched out also ultramarine pink and perylene violet. These are two colors that I wouldn't say I use them that often in my work. So that was just sort of like more of a novelty curiosity thing. I did also get ultramarine violet. I know that there's a few pigments that tend to not re-wet as easily. They tend to be a little bit lower tinting. People don't maybe like them as much, but I'm determined to find a use for them at some point. I picked up lavender in Jackman's as well as this cobalt blue pale. Now, I probably could live without the cobalt blue pale because it is, basically your average cobalt blue that feels like it has white added to it. Um, and I probably didn't need that. But I think they were out of cobalt blue, so I just went with this one thinking that I might be able to make do with it. But unfortunately, I don't think I would use this for anything. Now, this is Jackman's Phthalo Green, and frankly, I've been on kind of a Viridian and Phthalo Green kick alongside my pink kick. I have been really interested in testing different phthalo greens. I know that this is not a color a lot of people love, but for me, I find it so versatile for mixing, and it is one of those colors that I just find really easy to modify, and it's so powerful, and I just love it. I think it's a beautiful color. Finally, we have soft green, which is a granulating color from Jackman's. It was one of the granulating range that I hadn't tried yet, so I just wanted to add it to my collection. Now we're moving on to the Rosa Gallery paints, and I'm starting here with Buff Titanium, which was one of the new colors they just came out with. Now, I would say this Buff Titanium is a lot lighter than the rest of the Buff Titaniums I have in my collection. If you look up at the core version, which is the second row and the all the way to the left-hand side, you'll see that that one is a little bit more yellowish. So most of them have kind of a sandy color. So I would say the Rosa Gallery version is a lot more neutral, a lot closer to white than it is to brown or yellow. Then I swatched out the olive, what is it called? Olive gray deep or something like that, and which I did not like at all. It did not appeal to me as a color. I don't think I will use it. Thankfully, it was only £3 for the tube. But then I swatched out the Van Dyke Brown, and that one is excellent. I can definitely find a use for a deep, rich brown. This is Nightfall Orange. This is one of the new colors, and it is meant to be sort of a granulating orange color. Um, And now another one of their new colors, which is Rose Red Deep. I typically haven't been one for reds, but I just felt like I needed to try these ones, especially because these ones were leaning more pink. We have Rose Pale, which is more of a pastel shade, and so it is much more opaque than some of the others, although not crazily so. If you look at the black line that I've drawn, you can see the opacity of the watercolor. Also have Lilac Pale, which is a beautiful color, very similar to Daniel Smith's Wisteria, I would say. So if you are a fan of Wisteria, you probably will like Lilac Pale, and the Lilac Pale is a good deal cheaper. This is Ultramarine Gray, which is also one of the new colors. And I love this color. It is so beautiful. It is a rich, very blue, almost violet gray, I would say. And I can definitely see myself using this. Then we have Nightfall Azer, which is very similar to like a Payne's Gray, but a little bit more dynamic, I would say. It has PB15 in it. So yeah, maybe it's kind of closer to a lunar blue, perhaps. Anyways, let's pan over this page and see how these colors have dried out. I went over and did a second glaze over top of each of these just to show how much more intense it gets when you glaze. On this page, I am finishing off all of the rest of my Rosa Gallery swatches, starting with Naples Rose. Now, this is a paint, it's not new. I've had it in the pan form because originally, when I first purchased Rosa Gallery paints, I bought a set of 28 and they came as pans. And I have used this Naples Rose quite a lot, so I decided to get it in a tube form. Same with this Flame Orange. This flame orange, I'm sure it's not very light fast, but it is so vibrant and so beautiful. I've used it in quite a few winter drawings actually, where you get these very intense, bright highlights on tree twigs, especially Cordyceps sericea, which is like a dogwood that has red branches. When the sunlight hits it in the wintertime, this flame orange is basically the perfect color for that. This is another refill. So this is coral, and I have been using the pan that I had in my set and I need to refill. So I got the tube form. Next up is English Red, which is a color that I have come to enjoy more and more as time goes on. And then we have Burgundy Red. This is a color I've wanted for a while, and I just kept forgetting to put it in my cart and pick it up. So when I was doing the rest of my Rosa Gallery ordering, I threw it in the cart and it came along. This Opera Rose is actually a duplicate that I ordered by accident. So I realized once I was going through my colors and putting everything away that I already had a tube of Opera Rose, like a full tube pretty much. So I'm not sure what happened in my brain, but yeah, well, you can never have too much Opera Rose, can you? This is Quinacridone Lilac. Again, this is a refill for a pan that I had in the 28 set that I have pretty much used up. And so, yeah, this is a really beautiful color. It is I don't know if lilac is the right word. I think I would call it a quin purple, but yeah, whatever. Then we have Caput Mortuum. So I don't typically have a lot of Caput Mortuums in my collection. I have a few, but I just felt like I needed to try this one because it looked so intense. It actually, once it dried, looks quite similar to the Perylene Violet from Jackman's. I'm not sure if they have the same pigment in them, but I doubt it. The Caput Mortuum is a very rich, rich color. Then we have Royal Blue. This is also a refill for one of my pans. The pans that Rosa Gallery comes in are an odd shape. They are not like regular full pans. They're kind of like got the edges clipped off at an angle. So I decided that I was going to transition all of my Rosa Gallery pans into normal full pans. And that's, so that's kind of part of my strategy is I have to refill those. This is the Chromium Oxide Green. I really love Chromium Oxide Green in all of its varieties. I'm still on the search for like my perfect version of it. I think right now it's a tie between Sennelier and QOR. They both have really deep, rich chromium green oxides, but I also like Chromium Green Oxide Dark from Roman Szmal. It is amazing. The last color in this swatch chart is yellow ochre. I love yellow ochre, and I love this version of yellow ochre. It is just the perfect kind of mustardy yellow that is great for dry summer fields, autumn, winter. It's a great color. So this is them all dried out and with the second glaze over top. Now these Unison soft pastels were on for such a good deal from Everything Art. That's the art store I mentioned that was going out of business. And normally these retail for around £4 or £5 per whole pastel. And they were on sale for like £1.50 each. So I basically picked up every color that was available that I was remotely interested in, just because I was like, look, £1.50 each is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to Unison soft pastels. And even if I didn't have a use for them like right at this second, I know that eventually I will find reasons to use it. So the one thing I really, really love about Unison soft pastels is that they are water soluble and they give you that like flexibility to play with them and create really beautiful textures. So that's just what I'm doing with the brush here. And I worked in this Pan Art huge cloth bound sketchbook that I had unpacked before just to see how these would react on that paper. Usually I would use these on mixed media or watercolor paper or pastel paper, dedicated pastel paper, but I wanted to activate them with water and just try that out. I hope you have enjoyed this swatch party. I have made a beautiful mess on my desk, as you can see here. And if you like art hauls, I have another video coming out very soon, which is an art haul from earlier in July. I just have to finish editing it and then it'll be ready for you to enjoy. So thanks for watching and see you in the next one.